In 1227, a funeral procession moves silently across the Mongolian steppe, and every living creature that crosses its path is killed, so that no one may reveal where the body of the most powerful man on earth will rest. 8 centuries later, that grave has never been found. The man inside it was born with nothing, not even a tribe willing to claim him. How does a starving 9-year-old boy, abandoned on frozen grassland, become the ruler of the largest contiguous land empire in human history? This is the complete life of Temujin, the boy who became Genghis Khan. Not a fragment, not a collection of battles. The entire journey from the moment of his birth near Birken Khaldun Mountain around 1162, through every betrayal, every alliance forged in blood, every city that burned, every quiet night in a felt ger where an aging conqueror asked a wandering monk whether death could be defeated. You will witness the world he was born into, a steppe torn apart by warring tribes with no written law and no central power. You will follow his abandonment as a child, the years of eating roots and marmots to survive, the killing of his own half-brother over stolen food. You will see the blood brotherhood sworn with Jamukha, the man who would become his greatest rival. You will ride beside him as he rescues his kidnapped wife Berta, builds a coalition of the dispossessed, and tears down the old tribal aristocracy, replacing noble blood with earned loyalty. You will stand at the Kurultai of 1206, where thousands of mounted warriors proclaim him universal ruler beneath the 9-tailed white banner. You will march south through the Great Wall into the cities of northern China, west across the Silk Road into the irrigated gardens of Khwarezmia, and watch as Bukhara, Samarkand, and Merv fall into ash. You will ride with Jebe and Subutai on their extraordinary circuit around the Caspian Sea, 20,000 miles of reconnaissance that brought Mongol horses to the banks of European rivers. But you will also enter the private world behind the conquests, the documented devotion to Berta, the anguish over his eldest son Yochi, whose paternity was whispered about in every camp, the execution of the shaman Teb Tengri who grew too powerful, the meeting with the Taoist sage Chu Chuji in the mountains of Afghanistan, where the conqueror of half the world asked a single question: is there an elixir that grants eternal life? What makes this story extraordinary is not only its scale, though the scale defies belief. It is the paradox at its center. A man who valued loyalty above all else yet killed without hesitation. A nomad who could not read yet created a written legal code, a postal system spanning continents, and a policy of religious tolerance centuries ahead of its time. A destroyer of civilizations who inadvertently connected them, opening trade routes that carried silk, gunpowder, mathematics, and eventually plague between East and West. 16 million men alive today carry his genetic legacy. Modern Mongolia reveres him as the father of their nation. Persian chronicles remember him as the apocalypse made flesh. The truth, as always, is stranger and more human than any legend. If you value complete journeys through the lives that shaped our world, subscribe so you never miss what comes next. Each week we bring back to life one extraordinary figure, the real human being behind the immortal name. The story begins not with an empire, but with a boy watching his father ride away toward a Tatar camp, never to return alive. The steppe stretches without end beneath a sky so vast it swallows the horizon whole. Grass bends under wind that has traveled 1,000 miles without meeting a wall, a roof, a city. In every direction, the earth curves away into blue distance, the Khenti Mountains rising to the northeast like the spine of something ancient and sleeping, their flanks dark with pine and birch, their peaks still white with snow, even as summer opens across the lowlands. The Onon River cuts through this emptiness, its water cold and clear, running over stones smoothed by centuries. Along its banks, clusters of felt gurs stand like pale mushrooms against the green, smoke rising thin from their crown openings, horses grazing in loose herds nearby, children's voices carried on the wind. This is the world of the Mongol tribes in the 12th century of the Common Era. There is no nation here, no capital, no king whose word binds all. Instead, dozens of clans and tribal confederations, Mongols, Merkits, Tatars, Karaites, Naimans, shift across the grasslands in patterns dictated by season, by pasture, by war. Alliances form and shatter within a single generation. A chieftain's power lasts only as long as his ability to raid, to distribute plunder, to hold the loyalty of men who can ride away at dawn. The Jin dynasty of northern China watches from behind its walls, playing these tribes against one another with gifts of silk and titles, ensuring no single leader ever unites the steppe into something dangerous. Among the Borjigin clan, a lineage claiming descent from a mythical blue-grey wolf and a fallow doe, according to the origin tale later recorded in the secret history of the Mongols, a chieftain named Yesuge holds modest authority. He commands perhaps a few hundred followers. He is known as Yesuge the Brave, a man of physical strength and enough reputation to maintain alliances, but he rules no great confederation. His wife, Hoelun, was not given willingly. Yesuge seized her from a Merkit man named Chiledu while she traveled as a new bride, an act of violence common on the steppe, but one that planted a seed of vengeance the Merkits would harvest years later. Around the year 1162, near the sacred mountain Berchen Khaldun, Hoelun gives birth to a son. The child emerges, according to the secret history, clutching a blood clot the size of a knuckle bone in his tiny fist, an omen interpreted as a sign of destiny, of a warrior's fate written before the first breath. Yesuge names the boy Temujin, after a Tatar chieftain he has recently captured in battle. The name itself carries the residue of tribal war. The boy grows in the rhythm of nomadic life, the seasonal migrations following grass and water, the smell of burning dung fuel and fermenting mare's milk, the constant presence of horses. By the age of 9, Yesuge decides to seek a bride for his son among the Ongirat tribe, known for producing strong daughters. The journey takes father and son east across the steppe. They find a girl named Berta, slightly older than Temujin, and a betrothal is arranged. Yesuge leaves the boy with his future in-laws to grow familiar with them, then rides home alone. He never arrives. Along the way, Yesuge encounters a group of Tatars, the very people whose chieftain's name his son bears. They recognize him, or perhaps they simply offer hospitality to a lone traveler as custom demands. Either way, they poison his food. Yesuge makes it back to his own camp but dies within days, his body failing him on the felt floor of his ger. The year is approximately 1171. Temujin is summoned home from the Ongirat to find his father dead, his family's followers already scattering. The Taichiud clan, rivals within the broader Borjigin lineage, see no reason to follow a widow and her children. They take the herds, the followers, the future, and ride away, leaving Herlun and her sons to face the steppe alone. A boy of 9 stands beside a river, watching the dust of departing horsemen settle back into the grass. He owns nothing now but his mother's ferocity and the memory of a blood clot clenched in a newborn fist. The steppe does not forgive. It does not pause for grief or childhood. Winter comes regardless, the wind sharpening itself against the Khenti mountains, driving snow sideways across the open ground where Herlun and her children now survive alone. There are no herds left, no followers, no felt walls thick enough to hold back the cold that settles into bone. The family that remains is small. Herlun, her sons Temujin, Kasa, Kachiun, and Temuga, her stepsons Begter and Belgute from Yesuge's other wife, and a single daughter. They are perhaps 10 souls against the entirety of the Mongolian winter. The secret history of the Mongols, composed within a generation of these events, describes what follows with stark clarity. Herlun gathers wild onions, digs for roots along the river banks, picks berries where the scrub allows. She feeds her children on garlic and bird cherries. The boys fish the Onon River with bent hooks, catching small fish, minnows, river dace, that barely sustain a single body, let alone a family. They trap marmots and ground squirrels, skinning them for both meat and fur. This is not the life of a chieftain's household. This is the margin between existence and death, measured in handfuls of roots and the occasional lucky catch. Years pass in this condition. The boys grow lean and hard, their bodies shaped by hunger and cold and the relentless labor of survival without livestock or allies. And within this crucible, the first fracture appears, not from outside enemies, but from within the family itself. Begter, the eldest stepson, begins taking fish and small game caught by Temujin and Kasa, claiming the privilege of seniority. In a world where every mouthful means survival, this is not mere bullying. It is a claim to authority over the family's future. Temujin and Kasa go to their mother. Herlun rebukes them. They have no enemies but their own shadows, she says, and they must not turn on one another. But Temujin has already decided. He and Kasa stalk Begter on the open steppe, approaching from front and behind as Begter sits on a hillock. The half-brother sees them coming, sees the arrows nocked, and according to the secret history, he does not run. He tells them to spare Belgute, his full brother. Then the arrows fly. Temujin is perhaps 12 or 13 years old. He has killed his first man, not an enemy warrior, but his own kin, over stolen fish. Herlun's rage is recorded as volcanic. She compares her sons to wild dogs, to wolves that devour their own litter. But the act is done, and it establishes something essential about the boy who will become Genghis Khan. He will not tolerate any challenge to his authority, however small, however close. The killing of Begter is not madness. It is calculation, cold, premature, and absolute. The Taichud have not forgotten the family they abandoned. Word reaches Targutai Kiriltug, the Taichud chief, that Yesuge's sons are growing strong despite their exile. He rides with warriors to the family's camp. Temujin flees into the forest on Burkan Khaldun and hides for days among the birch and larch, surviving on what he can forage. But hunger or exhaustion drives him out. The Taichud capture him and lock his neck and wrists into a wooden kangwe, a portable stock that immobilizes the prisoner while allowing him to be paraded as a humiliation before the clan. He is passed from household to household, a captive displayed as a warning. But on a night when the Taichiud celebrate a feast along the Onon River and the guards grow careless, Temujin strikes his guard with the kangwei itself, then runs into the darkness. He hides in the river, submerged to his nostrils in the cold water, the wooden frame barely above the surface. A man named Sorkan Shira, from a subordinate family, finds him but does not betray him, instead helping him escape by night, hiding him beneath wool fleeces in a cart. Days later, Temujin returns to his family on the steppe, thinner, marked by the kangwei's bruises, but free. He is perhaps 15 or 16. He has killed a brother, survived imprisonment, escaped through darkness and freezing water. The steppe has tested him with every weapon it possesses: abandonment, starvation, humiliation, captivity, and he has endured. The boy who returns to Hoelun's camp is no longer merely surviving. He is beginning to plan. The first thing he needs is a horse. The secret history records that Temujin, returning from captivity with nothing but the bruises on his shoulders and the sharpened instincts of a survivor, tracks down a stolen mare, and in doing so encounters a boy named Bo-Chu, the son of a prosperous herder who abandons his father's camp without hesitation to ride alongside this gaunt, intense young stranger. It is the first freely chosen loyalty of Temujin's life, and he will never forget it. Bo-Chu will remain at his side for decades, rising to become one of the most trusted commanders in the empire that does not yet exist. With a horse beneath him and a companion beside him, Temujin rides to the Ongirat tribe to claim the bride promised years ago by his dead father. Berta is waiting. The betrothal, remarkably, still holds. Her family provides a dowry of extraordinary value for steppe politics, a coat of black sable fur, luxurious enough to serve as a diplomatic gift. Temujin understands its worth immediately. He does not keep it. Instead, he carries the sable south to the camp of Togrul Khan, leader of the Karaites, the most powerful tribal confederation on the eastern steppe. Togrul had once been Yesugei's sworn brother, his Anda. Temujin presents the sable coat, invokes his dead father's bond, and asks for patronage. Togrul accepts. In a single transaction, the orphan of the steppe acquires the protection of the most formidable warlord in Mongolia. But there is another bond, older and more dangerous. Jamuka of the Jadaran clan, a boy Temujin had known in childhood, with whom he had twice sworn the Anda oath, exchanging knuckle bones and arrowheads as tokens of eternal brotherhood. The secret history describes their bond with an intimacy that later chroniclers struggled to interpret. They shared a blanket, they feasted together, they spoke words that bound them closer than kinsmen. For a season, perhaps longer, Temujin and Jamuka ride together. Their camps merged, their followers intermingled. Two young men against the vastness of the steppe, each brilliant, each ambitious, each watching the other with eyes that hold both love and calculation. Then the Merkits come. 300 warriors descend on Temujin's camp at dawn, seeking revenge for an old grievance. Hoelun herself had been stolen from a Merkit man by Yesugei a generation earlier. Temujin flees into the forests of Burkhan Khaldun with his companions. Berta is seized. She is given to a Merkit warrior and held captive for months, some sources say nearly a year. Temujin calls upon both bonds. Togrul mobilizes 20,000 Karaite warriors. Jamuka brings his own forces. Together, the three armies fall upon the Merkit camps in a coordinated assault, scattering the tribe across the river valleys. Berta is recovered. She returns to Temujin alive, but she is pregnant. The child born soon after is named Yochi, a name meaning guest or unexpected visitor. The secret history does not dwell on the question, but it hangs in the silence between every recorded word. Whose son is Yochi? Temujin claims him, raises him, grants him a share of the future empire. Yet the doubt never fully dissolves. It will poison the succession decades later, when Jochi's brothers challenge his legitimacy at a feast that nearly tears the empire apart before it reaches its zenith. For now, though, Berta is returned, the Merkits are broken, and Temujin has demonstrated something the steppe has not seen from him before, the ability to summon powerful allies and coordinate military action across vast distances. He is no longer a fugitive. He is a young chieftain with a patron, a blood brother, a wife of fierce intelligence, and a growing band of followers who have chosen him not for his bloodline, but for something harder to define. The steppe recognizes strength, and strength on the steppe is not merely the arm that draws the bow, it is the voice that makes other men ride toward danger. Temujin possesses that voice. Jamuka possesses it too. Two Andas, two leaders, two visions of what the Mongol world might become, riding side by side across the grasslands, not yet enemies, but no longer quite the same. They ride together for perhaps a year and a half. The secret history describes the two camps moving as one across the steppe, sharing pastures, feasting, exchanging gifts. But the text also records a moment of fracture so subtle it might be missed. A single conversation between Jamuka and Temujin about where to make camp, about whether to settle near the hills where horses graze, or the streams where sheep drink. The words seem trivial. The meaning is not. Two leaders cannot share one herd forever. Around 1187, during a migration, the camps separate. The secret history frames it as Temujin's decision, guided by his mother Hoelun and wife Berta, who sense that Jamuka's loyalty has cooled. Other accounts suggest the split was gradual, followers drifting between the two men like water finding its level. What follows is the steppe's oldest referendum. Families, clans, and individual warriors choose. They ride toward one camp or the other, and in that riding they cast a vote that cannot be taken back. The sources record that a surprising number choose Temujin, not the man with the larger following or the more distinguished lineage, but the one who has already demonstrated something radical. He promotes men based on ability. A herder's son who fights well receives the same reward as a chief's nephew. This is not how the steppe has ever worked. Aristocratic blood has always determined rank. Temujin breaks that principle with quiet deliberation, and men of low birth flock to him because he offers what no other leader does, the possibility of rising. Jamuka watches these defections with growing fury. Around 1187, the tension becomes war. The Battle of Daylan Balzut, the 13 sides, is Temujin's first major defeat. The sources agree that Jamuka's forces are larger, better organized, and that they drive Temujin's coalition into retreat, pushing him into the narrow refuge of the Jireen Gorge along the Onon River. It is a humiliation. Temujin's fragile alliance might have shattered entirely, but Jamuka makes a choice that costs him everything he has won. After the battle, he executes prisoners with spectacular cruelty. The secret history records that he boils captives alive in great iron cauldrons, that he severs heads and drags them behind horses. Whether these accounts are literally true or amplified by later chroniclers sympathetic to Temujin, the political effect is documented: revulsion. Warriors who fought for Yamuka begin slipping away in the months that follow. They ride north, east, toward the man who lost the battle, but who treats captives as potential followers rather than objects of spectacle. The years between 1187 and 1197 are the quiet years, the rebuilding years. Temujin is not yet powerful enough to challenge Jamuka again. He remains under the protection of Togrul Khan of the Karaites, offering military service in exchange for shelter and legitimacy. He fights smaller engagements, absorbs defeated clans, and refines the principle that will eventually remake the steppe. Loyalty rewarded regardless of birth. Betrayal punished regardless of rank. Every man who joins him enters a system where merit determines position. Former slaves command units. Sons of chieftains serve under them if they prove less capable. The steppe grass grows and dies and grows again through these seasons. Snow buries the Khenti mountains and melts. Foals are born, trained, ridden to war. Temujin ages from a young man into something harder, a leader who has tasted defeat and learned from it, who understands that patience is itself a weapon. He does not rush toward the confrontation that must eventually come. He gathers, he waits, he lets Jamuka's cruelty do the work of recruitment for him, one defecting warrior at a time, one family loading their gear onto a cart and riding toward a different banner in the dark before dawn. By 1197, the waiting is over. The steppe has sorted itself into clear poles of power, and Temujin moves with the cold precision of a man who has spent years studying exactly where to strike first. The Tatars, the people who poisoned his father, who shaped his childhood into a thing of hunger and exile, become the opening target. He allies with the Jin dynasty of northern China, whose emperors regard the Tatars as a nuisance along their northern frontier. It is a marriage of convenience. Jin gold and official titles flow north. Mongol cavalry rides south and east. The Tatars, caught between imperial displeasure and steppe vengeance, are crushed in a series of campaigns between 1196 and 1202. What follows their defeat is something new. The secret history records that Temujin orders the measurement of every captured Tatar male against the linchpin of a cartwheel. Those taller than the axle are killed. The women and children are distributed among Mongol families, absorbed into the decimal structure of his growing nation. It is annihilation as policy, the erasure of a tribal identity so complete that the Tatars cease to exist as a political entity. Temujin himself takes 2 Tatar women as secondary wives. The personal and the strategic blur into a single act. The steppe watches. Togrul Khan of the Karaites, the old patron who helped rescue Berta, still holds the most powerful confederation on the central steppe. For years the alliance holds, but power reshapes every relationship, and Temujin's growing strength makes Togrul's son Sengum uneasy. By 1203 the break comes. Accounts differ on who betrayed whom first. The secret history frames Sengum as the instigator, plotting assassination. What is certain is that open war erupts between the 2 former allies. Temujin, initially caught off guard, retreats to the muddy waters of Lake Baljuna, where, according to tradition, he shares brackish water with a small band of followers from diverse backgrounds. Mongols, Khitans, Muslims, who swear loyalty in his darkest hour. The Baljuna Covenant, as later sources call it, becomes a founding myth of the empire. These men who drank bad water with a fugitive will become governors of provinces. From Baljuna, Temujin regroups and strikes. The Karaite army, larger but divided by internal politics, is defeated in a 3-day battle in the autumn of 1203. Togrul flees westward and is killed by Naiman border guards who do not recognize him. His people are absorbed, the same pattern, the same decimal reorganization, the same erasure of tribal identity in favor of a new structure loyal only to one man. Now only the Naimans remain. They hold the western steppe, and their court shelters Jamuka, the blood brother turned eternal rival, along with remnants of every defeated tribe. In 1204, Temujin marches west. The Battle of Chacomaut unfolds across open grassland, dust rising from tens of thousands of hooves. The Naiman king Tayang Khan, described in the secret history as indecisive, wavers on a hilltop, while his army fragments below. By nightfall, the Naimans are broken. Tayang Khan dies. His people scatter into the mountains or submit. Jamuka runs. He hides among followers who grow fewer with each passing season, until in 1205 his own companions seize him and deliver him to Temujin, hoping for reward. The secret history records that Temujin has these betrayers executed. A man who turns on his own lord deserves no trust. To Jamuka himself, the old blood brother, he offers mercy. Jamuka refuses, asking instead for a noble death without the spilling of blood in the Mongol tradition. His back is broken. The last rival is gone. Across the steppe, the old tribal banners come down one by one. Merkits, Tatars, Karaites, Naimans, Taichiud, names that defined generations of warfare, dissolve into a single entity. Temujin reassigns every family into new units of 10, 100, 1,000. A man fights beside strangers who become brothers through shared discipline rather than shared blood. The aristocracy of lineage, the ancient system where a chief's son inherited command regardless of ability, is systematically dismantled. Former slaves command hundreds. Captured enemies who prove loyal rise through ranks that did not exist a decade earlier. The steppe itself has not changed. The same wind, the same grass, the same enormous sky pressing down on the earth. But everything beneath that sky has been remade. One man stands where dozens of chiefs once quarreled. The unification is complete. What comes next will require a new title. The new title arrives in the spring of 1206, carried on the voices of thousands gathered at the headwaters of the Onon River. The Kurultai, the great assembly of all the peoples of the felt-walled tents, convenes on open grassland where the river runs shallow and clear over stones worn smooth by centuries. Horses stand in herds so vast they darken the steppe to the horizon. Smoke from cooking fires rises in hundreds of thin columns into a sky the Mongols call the eternal blue heaven. At the center of this gathering, raised on a felt carpet in the old tradition, Temujin receives the title that will follow him through history and beyond it. Genghis Khan, universal ruler. The precise meaning remains debated by scholars across 8 centuries. Some derive it from the Turkic word for ocean, a ruler as boundless as the sea. Others connect it to older Mongolic roots, suggesting firmness, strength, the unyielding. Whatever its etymology, the title announces something unprecedented. Not a chief among chiefs, not first among equals. A single sovereign over every tribe, every clan, every family from the forests of Siberia to the edge of the Gobi. The nine-tailed white banner, the tug, the spirit banner believed to carry the protective wind spirit of its owner, stands planted in the earth beside him. 9 tails of white stallion hair ripple in the spring wind. According to the secret history, the shaman Kokochu declares that the eternal blue heaven has ordained this man to rule. The assembled warriors affirm it. The steppe, for the first time in living memory, speaks with one voice. But proclamation alone means nothing without structure, and what follows the ceremony reveals the administrative mind behind the conqueror. Genghis Khan does not simply accept power, he builds the machinery to wield it. The decimal system already tested in war becomes the permanent skeleton of the state. Every man belongs to an Arban of 10, a Jagan of 100, a Mingan of 1,000, a Tumen of 10,000. 95 commanders of Mingans are appointed, chosen not by bloodline but by proven loyalty and battlefield competence. Among them stand names that will reshape continents. Mukhali, the steady general who will govern northern China. Jebe, the arrow, once an enemy archer who shot Genghis Khan's horse from under him and was rewarded for his honesty with command. Subute, son of a blacksmith, who will become perhaps the greatest cavalry general the world has ever produced. The Keshig, the Imperial Guard, is established at a strength of 10,000, drawn from the sons and brothers of commanders, serving simultaneously as elite soldiers and as hostages guaranteeing their families' loyalty. They guard the Khan's person, manage his household, and form the nucleus from which future generals and governors emerge. Then comes the law. The Yasa, the Great Code, is proclaimed, though no complete text survives to the present day, and its exact provisions are reconstructed from fragments in Persian and Chinese sources. What emerges from these accounts is a legal framework of startling scope. Theft is punishable by death. Adultery is punishable by death. The deliberate fouling of water, critical on the steppe, is punishable by death. Religious leaders of all faiths are exempted from taxation. Diplomatic envoys are declared inviolable. Succession disputes must be resolved at Kurultai. The law binds everyone, including the Khan himself, at least in principle. The Uyghur script is adopted for the Mongolian language, giving a people who had never written their words the tools of administration, correspondence, and record. Tata Tonga, a captured Uyghur scribe, teaches the Khan's sons to read and write. The Yamma, the relay messenger system, begins to take shape, a network of stations spaced a day's ride apart, where fresh horses and riders wait to carry orders across distances that would take weeks by ordinary travel. Standing at the source of the Onon in that spring of 1206, the man who was once an abandoned child on this same steppe has forged something that has never existed before. Not merely a tribal confederation held together by one personality, but an institutional state with written law, professional military hierarchy, and administrative infrastructure designed to outlast any single life. The steppe has not simply been unified. It has been transformed into a launching platform. The nine-tailed banner catches the wind and points south, toward the walls of kingdoms that do not yet know what is coming. The first target is not the greatest enemy, but the nearest. The Tangut kingdom of Shishya sits along the southern edge of the Gobi, a Buddhist state of irrigated oasis cities and camel caravans straddling the Silk Road's eastern corridors. In 1209, Mongol cavalry pours across the desert and strikes. The Tangut army meets them in the field and is broken. The capital, Zhongqing, endures a siege through the winter. The Mongols attempt to divert the Yellow River against the city walls, a crude effort that partially floods their own camp. But the lesson is delivered. Xixia submits, offers tribute, sends a princess to the Khan's court, and agrees to provide troops when called. The western flank is secured. The road south now opens toward a far greater prize. The Jin dynasty rules northern China from behind some of the most formidable fortifications on earth. Rammed earth walls, layered defensive lines, garrisoned cities stocked for years of siege enfe, an empire of 60 million people defended by armies that dwarf anything the steppe has ever produced. The Jin emperors are themselves descended from Jurchen conquerors, horse warriors who took northern China from the Song a century earlier and then settled behind Chinese walls, adopting Chinese administration, Chinese cities, Chinese weight. They are the overlords to whom Mongol tribes once paid tribute. Genghis Khan knows their strength. He also knows their weakness, the Khitan people of Manchuria, former rulers displaced by the Jurchen, who nurse old grievances and will defect at the first opportunity. In 1211, the Mongol army crosses the Gobi and reaches the frontier. The scale is staggering. Perhaps 100,000 mounted warriors moving in coordinated columns across terrain that would exhaust a European army in days. At Yehuling, the pass known as Badger Mouth, the Jin deploy a massive force to block the mountain approach. The Mongols send Jebe with a detachment through an alternate route, striking the Jin rear while the main force pins them at the pass. The result is annihilation. Tens of thousands of Jin soldiers die in the narrow defile, and the road to the North China Plain lies open. What follows is not conquest in the traditional sense, but devastation. The Mongols do not yet know how to take walled cities. They sweep across the open countryside, burning harvests, scattering garrisons, driving refugees toward the cities until the cities choke on their own displaced populations. Famine and plague do what siege engines cannot. Khitan officers and Chinese engineers begin defecting, bringing with them the knowledge of catapults, trebuchets, and gunpowder weapons. The Mongols learn with terrifying speed, absorbing the military technology of every civilization they touch. Zhongdu, the Jin capital, modern Beijing, holds out behind triple walls and a garrison of thousands. Genghis Khan does not waste his cavalry against stone. He blockades. He raids the surrounding provinces until no supply column can reach the city. By 1215, the Jin emperor has already fled south to Kaifeng, abandoning his capital. When Zhongdu finally falls, it burns for a month. A visiting diplomat later describes streets greased with human fat, bones piled in white mountains outside the gates. The Mongols strip the city of its gold, silk, artisans, and engineers, human capital as valuable as any treasure. Yet Genghis Khan does not stay. He has no interest in ruling Chinese cities personally, no patience for the bureaucratic machinery of a sedentary empire. He appoints Mukhali, one of his most trusted generals, a man born into servitude who rose through pure ability, as viceroy of the Chinese campaign, granting him the title of prince and leaving him with a relatively small force to continue the grinding war against the Jin. The Khan himself turns his attention westward, back toward the steppe, where reports arrive of a distant empire rich beyond imagination. The Jin War will drag on for another 2 decades, finished only by his successors. But the pattern has been set. The Mongol war machine does not merely defeat armies. It absorbs their knowledge, their engineers, their weapons, and turns conquered expertise into the instrument of the next conquest. Each victory makes the next one more sophisticated, more lethal, more inevitable. The empire that draws his gaze westward is unlike anything the steppe has produced. The Khwarezmian Empire under Shah Muhammad II stretches from the borders of India to the shores of the Caspian, encompassing the ancient cities of Transoxiana, Bukhara, Samarkand, Urgench, where irrigated gardens bloom in the desert and caravans carry silk, spices, and silver along routes older than memory. Its ruler commands perhaps 400,000 soldiers, governs from palaces of glazed tile, and styles himself a second Alexander. On paper, this is the mightiest Muslim state of its age. Genghis Khan's first approach is not military but commercial. Around 1217, he dispatches a caravan of several hundred Muslim merchants, some sources say 450, laden with gold, silver, Chinese silk, musk, and jade, accompanied by a Mongol ambassador bearing a message of peaceful trade. The caravan reaches Otrar, a frontier city on the Sir Darya River, governed by Inalchuk, a kinsman of the Shah's mother. What happens next will reshape the map of the world. Inalchuk accuses the merchants of espionage, seizes their goods, and executes them all. Whether he acts on his own greed or on secret orders from Shah Muhammad remains debated in the sources. Juvaini suggests the Shah's complicity, while other accounts portray a governor acting beyond his authority. Genghis Khan's response reveals the calculated patience that separates him from mere raiders. He does not strike immediately. Instead, he sends a second embassy, 3 ambassadors, directly to Shah Muhammad, demanding the surrender of Inalchuk for punishment and restitution for the murdered merchants. It is a measured diplomatic gesture, offering the Shah a path that avoids war. Muhammad's answer is unambiguous. He executes the lead ambassador and sends the other 2 back with their beards burned off, a deliberate humiliation in the customs of both cultures. The sources agree on this point. The Shah has chosen. Through 1218 and 1219, the steppe transforms into a staging ground of unprecedented scale. Mongol decimal units converge from across the empire. Warriors ride in from garrisons in northern China, from the forests of Siberia, from newly conquered Turkic lands. Modern estimates suggest between 100,000 and 150,000 mounted soldiers gather, the largest army Genghis Khan has ever personally commanded. But numbers alone do not explain what is assembling. Muslim merchants who trade across both empires provide detailed intelligence. The disposition of Khwarezmian garrisons, the political fractures between Shah Muhammad and his powerful mother Turkan Khatun, the discontent of Turkish military commanders, the layout of city defenses and water supplies. The Khan makes a strategic decision that reveals the scope of his thinking. He leaves the Jin War unfinished, Mughal continuing the grind in China with limited forces, because the insult at Otrar demands a response that will echo across every trade route in the known world. This is not impulse. It is the understanding that an empire built on commerce and communication cannot allow its merchants and ambassadors to be murdered without consequence. Every city along the Silk Road is watching. The army that begins moving westward in the autumn of 1219 carries with it Chinese siege engineers, catapult crews, specialists in mining walls and diverting rivers. It carries intelligence maps drawn from merchant testimony. It carries a fury refined into doctrine, the knowledge that what happens to Khwarezmia will serve as a message to every kingdom that might consider resisting Mongol authority. The Feldgers are struck, the horse herds driven forward in their tens of thousands, and the dust of their passage darkens the horizon for days. Shah Muhammad, behind his palace walls in Samarkand, has no conception of what approaches. He has scattered his vast army in garrison detachments across dozens of cities, choosing static defense over concentration, a decision that will prove catastrophic. The merchant's blood spilled at Otrar has purchased something the Shah cannot imagine: the undivided attention of the most effective military force the medieval world has ever produced. The army crosses the Syr Darya in the autumn of 1219, and the world that exists on the other side will not survive the winter. Genghis Khan divides his forces with a precision that reveals months of intelligence gathering, each column assigned a specific city, a specific route, a specific purpose. The Shah's decision to disperse his garrisons across the empire means that no single force can concentrate against the Mongols. Every city stands alone. Otrar falls first. Chagatai and Ogedei besiege it for 5 months through the winter, the garrison fighting with desperate knowledge of what awaits. Governor Inalchuk, the man who murdered the Mongol caravan, holds the citadel until the last wall crumbles. He is captured alive. According to Juvaini, molten silver is poured into his eyes and ears, the merchant's goods returned in the currency of agony. But the true blow lands further south. Genghis Khan himself leads a force through the Kazilkum Desert, terrain the Khwarezmians consider impassable, and appears before Bukhara in February of 1220, bypassing every defensive position the Shah has prepared. The garrison attempts a breakout and is destroyed in the open. The city surrenders. The Khan rides his horse into the courtyard of the Great Friday Mosque, and according to Juvaini's account, addresses the assembled population, declaring himself the punishment of God sent to chastise them for their sins. Whether these exact words were spoken or crafted later by the Persian historian, the message is clear. Bukhara burns. Its scholars, its libraries, its centuries of accumulated learning feed the flames. The population is driven out, the young men conscripted as human shields for the next siege, the artisans separated and sent east. Samarkand, the jewel of Central Asia, falls in March of 1220 after only 5 days. Its garrison of perhaps 40,000 is overwhelmed. The Mongols use captured prisoners to swell their apparent numbers, driving them forward against the walls. The city's defenders, seeing what appears to be an endless army, lose the will to resist. Samarkand's surrender does not save it from systematic looting and mass killing. Shah Muhammad flees. He abandons his capital, his army, his empire, riding west with a small escort, while Jebi and Subutai pursue him with 20,000 horsemen across the breadth of his own kingdom. The most powerful Muslim ruler in the world dies in December of 1220 on a small island in the Caspian Sea, dressed in rags, stripped of everything, consumed by illness and despair. With the Shah dead, the Mongol columns fan across Khorasan. The destruction that follows defies comprehension. Merv, one of the largest cities on earth, surrenders in February of 1221. The entire population is marched outside the walls and divided among the Mongol soldiers for execution. The Persian historian records the dead at over 1 million, a number likely exaggerated but reflecting a slaughter of staggering scale. Nishapur falls next, its resistance punished so completely that the site is ploughed with horses. Herat submits, then rebels, then is destroyed in turn. Balkh, the ancient mother of cities, opens its gates peacefully and is annihilated regardless. The irrigation canals that sustain agriculture across this arid land are deliberately broken. Underground channels called conquests, some maintained for centuries, are collapsed and filled with rubble. Fields that have fed millions return to dust. Some of these systems will never be rebuilt. The fertile crescent of Central Asia begins a transformation into the barren landscape that persists into the modern era. Refugees stream into Afghanistan, into India, into the mountains, carrying stories that spread faster than the horsemen themselves. Cities 1,000 miles from the nearest Mongol scouts surrender preemptively, sending tribute and hostages. The terror functions exactly as designed. Each destroyed city is a message written in ash and bone, legible across continents. The cost of resistance is annihilation. The cost of killing Mongol ambassadors is the erasure of civilization itself. By the end of 1221, the Khwarezmian Empire has ceased to exist. Its cities are ruins, its population scattered or dead, its sultan buried in an unmarked island grave. The campaign has lasted barely 2 years. The army that accomplished it now stands at the crossroads of Asia, its horses grazing in gardens that once watered the richest trade cities on the Silk Road, the smoke of their destruction still drifting across a sky that offers no judgment. 2 generals ride west with 20,000 men and no orders to return by any fixed date. Jebe, the arrow that once pierced Genghis Khan's horse in battle and was rewarded for his honesty rather than executed, and Subutai, the son of a blacksmith who has never lost an engagement, these 2 are loosed upon the world like hunting eagles slipped from the wrist with a single instruction: pursue, reconnoiter, and destroy whatever resists. Their first quarry is Jalal al-Din, the dead Shah's son, the one Khwarezmian prince with the will to fight. He has gathered remnants of his father's shattered armies in Afghanistan, and in the spring of 1221 he stands on the banks of the Indus River with his back to the water and nowhere left to retreat. The Mongol force catches him there. The battle is savage and close, fought on a narrow plain between mountains and the swollen river. Jalal al-Din fights with a desperation that earns even Genghis Khan's reported admiration, but his army breaks, and the prince himself plunges his horse into the Indus, swimming across in full armor while arrows strike the water around him. He escapes into India. The Mongols do not follow across the river. Their purpose lies in another direction entirely. Jebe and Subutai turn north. The column moves through the mountains of Persia, emerging onto the plains of Azerbaijan in the winter of 1221. The Christian kingdom of Georgia, under King George IV, sends its cavalry to meet them. The Georgians are among the finest heavy cavalry in the Western world. Armored knights on powerful horses, veterans of crusading warfare. The Mongols defeat them twice, once through feigned retreat, drawing the Georgian charge into an ambush, and again in open battle. The kingdom reels. Its army, undefeated for a generation, is broken in weeks. The column presses north through the Caucasus passes in 1222, emerging onto the vast grasslands north of the mountains. Here the Cumans, Turkic nomads who control the steppe between the Black Sea and the Caspian, form an alliance with the Alans against the invaders. Subutai sends messages to the Cumans. Fellow steppe people, he argues, should not fight alongside settled mountain folk. The Cumans withdraw from the alliance, the Mongols destroy the Alans, then turn and destroy the Cumans who trusted their word. It is a lesson in diplomacy as weapon. The surviving Cuman chiefs flee west to the Russian principalities, begging for aid. The princes of Kiev, Chernigov, Galich, and other cities assemble a combined force of perhaps 80,000, the largest army the Russian lands have fielded in living memory. They march south to meet the Mongols on the Kalka River in late May of 1223. The Mongols retreat for 9 days, drawing the Russian coalition forward, stretching their lines, separating the eager from the cautious. On the 31st of May, at the Kalka River, Subutai turns. The Mongol heavy cavalry strikes the disordered Russian vanguard, while light horse archers envelop the flanks. The coalition shatters. 6 Russian princes die on the field or in the rout. 3 captured princes are placed beneath a wooden platform where the Mongol generals feast, slowly crushing them, a death without blood spilling, reserved in Mongol custom for royalty. Then, as suddenly as they appeared, the Mongols withdraw eastward. They do not occupy the Russian lands. They do not siege cities. They have learned what they came to learn: the terrain, the distances, the quality of resistance, the political fractures that can be exploited. This knowledge will wait 13 years before Batu Khan returns with a full invasion force. Jebedi's on the return journey. The sources disagree whether from illness or wounds sustained in the Caucasus. Subutai rides home alone in command, arriving in Mongolia in 1224 after a circuit of roughly 20,000 miles through lands no Mongol had ever seen. He carries in his memory the map of a future conquest that will carry Mongol horses to the gates of Vienna. The reconnaissance is complete. The world has been measured and found wanting. The conqueror who has measured the world returns to a felt-walled room. The great imperial ger stands at the center of the camp like a white mountain, its lattice frame covered in layers of wool, felt bleached by sun and rain, its doorway always facing south towards the warmth. Inside, the central hearth sends smoke upward through the crown opening where a circle of sky is visible, blue in daylight, black and star-filled at night. The floor is covered in carpets taken from Khwarezmian palaces, and along the walls hang weapons, quivers, and the pelts of wolves and snow leopards. Here the man who commands armies numbering in the hundreds of thousands sits cross-legged on felt cushions, drinking fermented mare's milk from a wooden bowl, and here the private architecture of his life becomes visible. Berta remains what she has been since before the first conquest. Chief wife, first among all women of the empire, the political center around which the household orbits. The secret history records no moment where her counsel is dismissed. She manages the Ordo, the great mobile court, and her sons alone carry the right of succession. Other wives exist, perhaps dozens by the 1220s, taken from conquered peoples or offered in alliance. The Tatar Yesugan and her sister Yesui hold honored positions. The Merkit Kulan bears a favored son. Yet Berta's 4 sons, Yochi, Chagatai, Ogedei, Tolui, are the only princes who matter, and the tension among them shapes the empire's future as surely as any battle. The eldest, Yochi, carries a wound no victory can heal. Born 9 months after Berta's rescue from Merkit captivity, his paternity remains forever uncertain. The secret history preserves the silence around this question like scar tissue around a blade still lodged in flesh. Chagatai, the second son, is the one who speaks what others think, hot-tempered, rigid in law, openly contemptuous of his elder brother's blood. Urgadai III drinks heavily, but possesses a generosity and steadiness that makes him acceptable to all factions. Tolui, the youngest, stays closest to his father, inherits the homeland and the largest share of the army by Mongol custom, and drinks himself toward an early grave. The physical man behind these family tensions is described most fully by Rashid al-Din, writing a century later, drawing on sources now lost, tall, broad-shouldered, with cat's eyes of grey or green and reddish hair. These details remain debated, possibly reflecting Borjigin clan characteristics rather than eyewitness testimony. What the sources agree upon is his stamina, his capacity for sustained attention during hunts that lasted weeks, and a voice that commanded silence in crowded assemblies. His spiritual world is Tengrism, the worship of the eternal blue sky, the reverence for sacred mountains, the consultation of shamans who read cracks in burned sheep bones. Yet when the shaman Teb Tengri grows powerful enough to drive a wedge between the Khan and his brothers, claiming heaven speaks through him alone, the response is swift. Teb Tengri's back is broken, the sources say by wrestlers acting on quiet orders, and no shaman again presumes to rival the Khan's authority. The spiritual realm serves the state, never the reverse. In 1222, while his armies reduce Khwarezmian cities to rubble, Genghis Khan summons the Taoist sage Chu Chuji from northern China. The old monk travels over a year to reach the Khan's camp near the Hindu Kush. Their conversations, recorded by a disciple, reveal an aging conqueror asking the single question that power cannot answer: whether an elixir of immortality exists. Chiu Chuji replies that there are methods to preserve health, but no medicine that conquers death. The Khan listens. He does not punish the honesty. He grants the Taoists tax exemption across his empire. The man who has destroyed more human life than perhaps any single individual before him sits in the lamplight of a felt tent, asking a monk how not to die. The sky above the smoke hole offers no answer. The steppe wind moves the felt walls gently, as it has since before any empire, and will after the last one falls. The empire that stretches from the Pacific coast to the Caspian Sea does not hold itself together by sword alone. Behind the columns of cavalry, behind the smoke of ruined cities, a system operates, precise, deliberate, and unlike anything the nomadic world has produced before. It is this system, not merely the terror, that transforms conquest into governance and ensures that what Genghis Khan builds will outlast the generation that built it. The foundation is the Yasa. No complete text survives into the modern era. Fragments are preserved in Persian and Arabic chronicles, quoted by Juvaini and Rashid al-Din, referenced in Armenian and Chinese sources. What emerges from these scattered records is a legal code of startling scope. The Yasa prohibits theft under penalty of death. It mandates the return of lost property to its owner. It forbids the enslavement of fellow Mongols. It regulates the conduct of war, specifying that soldiers who abandon their unit in battle forfeit their lives, that a city which surrenders without resistance shall not be plundered, that ambassadors are inviolable regardless of the message they carry. It establishes religious tolerance as imperial policy. No faith is persecuted, no priest or monk or imam taxed, no temple burned by Mongol order. This is not generosity. It is calculation. An empire spanning dozens of religions cannot afford sectarian war within its own borders. The army itself is the state's skeleton. Every male between 15 and 70 owes military service. They are organized not by tribe or clan, but by decimal units, Arbans of 10, Jaguns of 100, Mingans of 1,000, Tumans of 10,000. A man from a defeated Naiman tribe rides beside a Mongol of the Borjigin, beside a Karaita, beside a former Merkit captive. The old tribal loyalties are deliberately shattered. Commanders rise by proven ability. Subutai, born the son of a blacksmith, commands armies of 50,000. Jebe, who once fought against Temujin and nearly killed him, becomes one of the empire's greatest generals. Loyalty and competence determine rank. Birth determines nothing. The yam binds this vastness into a functioning whole. Relay stations stand at intervals of roughly 25 to 30 miles across the empire's roads. Each station maintains fresh horses, supplies, and riders. A message can cross the breadth of the empire in days rather than months. Merchants carry a tablet of authority, a paisa, that guarantees them food, horses, and protection at every station. Trade flows under this security as it has never flowed before. Silk, spices, gunpowder, astronomical instruments, medical knowledge, and religious texts move between China and Persia along routes where a single woman carrying gold, as later travelers will claim, could walk unmolested from one end of the empire to the other. Census takers move through conquered lands, counting households, assessing livestock, recording the taxable capacity of every district. The empire knows what it possesses. It knows what it can extract. Taxation replaces random plunder, a transition from raiding to ruling that occurs within a single generation. And beneath all of this administrative precision lies the empire's darkest instrument, terror deployed as policy. The destruction of cities that resist is not madness, it is messaging. When Merv falls and its population is systematically executed, 700,000 according to Juvaini, a figure likely exaggerated but reflecting genuine catastrophe, the next city in the army's path receives the news. Surrender comes faster. Walls open without siege. Granaries are offered intact. The calculation is brutal but coherent. Absolute destruction of the few ensures the bloodless submission of the many. Cities that surrender early are taxed, administered, and left functioning. Cities that resist cease to exist. A rider gallops between yam stations under the eternal blue sky, carrying orders written in Uyghur script on paper manufactured in Samarkand, sealed with the authority of a man who could not read. The empire functions not because one man controls every detail, but because the system he designed makes control unnecessary at every level. The law holds, the relay carries, the army obeys its decimal structure, the merchants travel, the census counts, and the memory of what happens to those who defy the system keeps the system running without constant force. This is the architecture that will outlive its architect. The architecture outlives its architect only if the architect names the hand that will maintain it. By 1222, Genghis Khan is approximately 60 years old. The Khwarezmian Empire lies in ruins behind him. His generals still ride west on their great circuit around the Caspian. And the question that no legal code can answer, that no decimal system can organize, presses against the felt walls of the imperial jur with the weight of inevitability. Who inherits the world? 4 sons stand in the line of succession, all born to Berta, all legitimate by Mongol custom. Yet the eldest carries a shadow that has followed him since the womb. Yochi, firstborn, conceived during or just after Berta's captivity among the Merkits. The secret history records what happens when the succession is raised at a family council during the Khwarezmian campaign. Chagatai, the second son, speaks the unspeakable. He names Yochi a Merkit bastard, a foundling of enemy seed. The 2 brothers lunge at each other. Yochi seizes Chagatai by the collar. The great Gur falls silent with the weight of what cannot be unsaid. Genghis Khan watches his sons tear at each other and makes the calculation that will shape the post-conquest world. Neither Yochi nor Chagatai can rule, for neither will accept the other's authority. The compromise falls on Ögedei, the 3rd son, described in sources as genial, diplomatic, a drinker and a conciliator, a man both elder brothers might tolerate above them. Tolui, the youngest, receives what Mongol custom grants the last-born: the homeland, the hearth, the original patrimony of the steppe itself, along with the largest share of the army. The division takes shape not as a single decree, but as an evolving arrangement across these final years. Yochi receives the western lands, everything the Mongol horse has conquered or will conquer toward the setting sun, the lands beyond the Aral Sea, the steppes stretching toward Russia. Chagatai receives Central Asia, the former Khwarezmian territories, the Silk Road cities now reduced to rubble and slowly rebuilding. Ögedei receives the lands of Western Mongolia and the Altai region, but more critically, he receives the title Great Khan, supreme over his brothers. Tolui holds the Mongolian heartland and commands the bulk of the imperial army, a combination that will prove explosive in the next generation. The old conqueror understands what Chiu Chuji confirmed in their conversations in the Hindu Kush. There is no elixir of immortality. The Taoist sage told him plainly that there are medicines to prolong life, but none to escape death. The man who conquered more territory than any human before him cannot conquer time. The division of the empire is his acknowledgement of that truth, an attempt to project his will beyond the grave, to make the system function without the singular force that created it. Then Yochi dies. In February of 1227, word reaches the Khan that his eldest son is dead in his western territories. The circumstances remain opaque across 8 centuries. Some sources suggest illness. Others hint at assassination ordered by his father, for Yochi had grown distant, had failed to appear when summoned, had perhaps contemplated independence. Rashid al-Din, writing decades later, records that Genghis Khan had already spoken of Yochi as disobedient, that plans for a campaign against his own son may have been forming. The truth lies buried with both men. What survives is the structure. 4 appanages, 4 lineages, 1 supreme Khan to hold them in tension. It is an elegant solution and a fatal one. For now, the aging warrior's authority holds everything together. His word is still law, his presence still the gravitational center. But he has built a system that depends on consensus among brothers who despise each other, and consensus is the one thing the steppe has never reliably produced. The empire's greatest vulnerability is not its enemies beyond the borders, it is the bloodline within. The Khan turns his attention south toward unfinished business. The Tangut kingdom of Xixia, which refused his summons during the Khwarezmian War, still stands. An aging conqueror mounts his horse one final time, riding toward the last campaign, carrying the knowledge that the world he built will pass to hands he can no longer guide. The army moves south in the winter of 1226, and the man who leads it is no longer young. He is approximately 64 years old, perhaps 65. The steppe does not keep precise birth records, and the body that once survived abandonment, starvation, and arrows has begun to betray him. But the mind remains what it has always been: precise, patient, and unforgiving. The Tangut kingdom of Shishya refused to send troops when he rode west against Khwarezmia. He has not forgotten. The steppe does not forget. The campaign begins with characteristic efficiency. Mongol columns sweep down through the frozen corridors between the Gobi and the Helan mountains, striking Tangut frontier garrisons before word of the invasion can travel south. Cities that submitted 17 years earlier now face a different kind of war. This is not conquest for tribute. This is punishment. The Tangut fortresses along the Yellow River bend fall one after another through the early months of 1227, their walls breached by siege engineers perfected in the wars against Jin China and the cities of Central Asia. Smoke rises from irrigated farmland. Canals are broken. Granaries burn. The Tangut capital, Zhongxing, comes under siege. Its defenders hold with a desperation born of understanding what surrender will mean. They have heard what happened to Bukhara, to Samarkand, to Merv. The siege grinds through the spring and into summer, the Mongol army tightening around the city like a fist closing. And somewhere during this final campaign, the conqueror's body fails. The sources fracture here into competing accounts. The secret history of the Mongols, composed within years of the event, states simply that he fell ill. Rashid al-Din's later chronicle suggests a fall from his horse during a hunt, an injury from which he never recovered. A Tangut legend, recorded centuries afterward, claims a captured Tangut queen concealed a weapon and wounded him. A story most historians regard as folklore rather than fact. What the sources agree upon is this. By the summer of 1227, Genghis Khan is dying, and he knows it. He issues final orders from his camp. Zhongxing must fall. The Tangut royal line must be extinguished. The war must be completed. According to tradition preserved in multiple sources, he commands that his death be kept secret until the campaign concludes, so that the enemy draws no hope from it. On or around the 18th of August, 1227, in the shadow of the Liupan mountains of what is now Gansu province, the man born as Temujin on the slopes of Burkhan Khaldun ceases to breathe. The felt walls of his gyr hold the silence of a world about to change. His generals obey. The death is concealed. Zhongxing surrenders shortly after, and the Mongol army carries out the destruction their Khan commanded. The Tangut kingdom, which had endured for nearly 2 centuries, is annihilated so completely that its written language will not be deciphered for 700 years. The body begins its journey home. A funeral cortege moves north across the steppe, and according to multiple sources, though the details vary, every living creature encountered along the route is killed, ensuring no witness can reveal the path. The grave is dug in secret. Horses are driven across the earth to erase all trace. Some accounts say the burial site lies on or near Burkhan Khaldun, the sacred mountain of his birth. Others place it elsewhere. Trees grow, grass returns. The land swallows the evidence as completely as if the earth itself conspired in the concealment. No monument marks the place, no inscription names it. 8 centuries of searching by treasure hunters, archaeologists, satellite surveys have found nothing. The man who reshaped the map of the world from the Pacific to the Caspian lies somewhere beneath the grassland of Mongolia, in a silence so absolute it has become its own kind of monument. The steppe that made him has taken him back, and it keeps its secrets with the same indifference it showed the orphaned boy who once starved upon its frozen surface. The wind moves through the grass above the unmarked earth, and it carries no name. 2 years pass before the empire names its next voice. In 1229, at a Kurultai on the Kurlan River, Ögedei ascends to the throne his father designated, the compromise son, the drinker, the diplomat, the one whose temperament could hold brothers together. Under his hand, the conquests resume with terrifying momentum. Mughali's successors press deeper into Jin territory. By 1234, the Jin dynasty collapses entirely, its last emperor dead by suicide in the burning city of Kaiju. The north of China belongs to the Mongols. Then the empire turns west again. Batu, son of the dead Jochi, leads 150,000 riders into the forests of Russia and the plains of Europe between 1236 and 1242. Kiev falls in December 1240. Polish knights die at Legnica. Hungarian armies shatter at Mohi. For a moment the Mongol vanguard waters its horses in the Adriatic. Only Ögedei's death in 1241 pulls the princes back east for another Kurultai, and Europe exhales without understanding how close it came. Mönke, grandson through Tolui, takes the throne in 1251 and sends his brother Hulagu west into Persia. In 1258, Baghdad falls. The Abbasid Caliph rolled in a carpet and trampled beneath horses. 5 centuries of Islamic intellectual capital drowned in the Tigris, its waters running black with ink from destroyed libraries. Meanwhile, Kublai, another of Tolui's sons, presses south. By 1279, the Song dynasty surrenders, and for the first time in history, all of China answers to a single foreign ruler. The empire reaches its maximum extent, from Korea to Poland, from Siberia to the Persian Gulf. Nearly a quarter of the world's population lives under Mongol authority. Yet the very vastness contains the fracture. The Golden Horde rules the western steppe. The Chagatai Khanate holds Central Asia. The Ilkhanate governs Persia. The Yuan dynasty commands China. They share a lineage, but not a policy. By the early 1300s, they war against each other as readily as against outsiders. The unity Genghis Khan forged through personal will does not survive the multiplication of heirs. What does survive is the infrastructure. The Yam relay carries messages and merchants across 12,000 miles. The Pax Mongolica opens roads that had been closed for centuries. Marco Polo travels east. Papal envoys reach Karakoram. Chinese gunpowder knowledge drifts westward. So too, perhaps, does pestilence, the Black Death of 1347 possibly travelling along those same trade arteries from Central Asian reservoirs to the ports of the Black Sea and onward into Europe, killing 1/3 of its population. The empire that connected the world also connected its plagues. By 1368, the Yuan dynasty falls to the Ming. The Ilkhanate has already dissolved. The Chagatai realm fragments. The Golden Horde lingers longest, its remnants enduring into the 1500s. The political empire is gone. The legend is not. Persian chronicles preserve him as divine punishment. Chinese histories record administrative genius alongside devastation. The secret history of the Mongols, composed within years of his death, renders him human, petty, generous, afraid, visionary. For 7 centuries under foreign and communist rule, Mongolians whisper his name when they cannot speak it aloud. After 1990, independent Mongolia resurrects him. His face on currency, his name on the airport, a 40-meter steel statue rising from the steppe east of Ulaanbaatar. In 2004, a genetic study estimates that approximately 16 million men alive carry a Y chromosome lineage traceable to a single Central Asian ancestor from roughly the 12th century. The orphan who starved beside the Onon River fathered a measurable fraction of humanity. The tomb remains hidden. The steppe grass grows undisturbed above whatever bones lie beneath Birken Khaldun or some other unnamed slope. The eternal blue sky stretches overhead, the same sky the Mongols called Tengri, the same sky beneath which a 9-year-old boy watched his father's clan ride away and leave him to die. He did not die. He became the name that history cannot forget, cannot fully judge, and cannot find beneath the earth. Thank you for journeying across this entire story. If these voices from the deep past have moved you, consider subscribing so you never miss the next life we bring back from the silence of history.